Hey everyone, how are you? Hope you're having a wonderful day, afternoon, or night. Today's lesson is going to be about, I'll tell a story, but at first I really wanted to make sure that I said that it's important that we look at ourselves and we appreciate each day that we spend on this earth. Growing up, some of the children are not being told how special they really are. So, let's start with us. You are special. Tell yourself that you love yourself. I love you. Tell yourself that. Look at yourself. Embrace these moments. We don't know what's going to happen next. Corona has come into our lives, and we don't know from day to day the different changes that will be occurring. So because we don't know, why don't we just look at it as we need to begin to embrace these moments and enjoy and appreciate them, okay? So, my mother used to always say growing up, don't trouble trouble or trouble will trouble you. Let's say it together. Don't trouble trouble or trouble will trouble you. She told this to us to make sure that we were conscious of the decisions that we were making. When you're conscious of the decisions that you're making sure that you're not hurting anyone. You're making sure that you're making good decisions, trying to just be a good person, okay? Checking in with yourself and making sure that you are loving yourself and treating others the way you might want to be treated. It's windy again today, guys. Excuse me. So, this was happening in the Bronx. This story takes place. There was a building, 6-story building in the Bronx, T-Bot Avenue. And Bo lived on the 4th floor, apartment 4A. Happened around 1978, 79. All right. During that time, he had a group of friends that they would go to school together. They'd take their bikes and they'd go to school, ride their bikes together. But on this particular morning, they ended up just walking to school. So each of them would communicate in different codes. One might yell out the window and make a certain cackling call to make sure that the others knew that he was getting ready to come outside, So they all had to get ready for school that morning, and they ended up catching up with each other. So on their way walking down the street, they crossed the street to the right, because on the left side there was a construction zone that was going on. Somehow, the people who had demolitioned the buildings that were once there, they never put up any type of gates or any type of safety partitions to make sure that the neighborhood would be safe. So certain things had to happen, but they did not. And in the event, these boys went to school, and on their way to school, they stopped at the corner store. And at the corner store, they were having a special penny candy sale. So the boys got together. Rodney had his dollar. Tommy had his. Bo had his, and there was another boy. Either way, they went ahead and they got their candy or what have you, and they heard the bell ring at the school across the street. And they were afraid that they were going to have to deal with Miss Muriel. And Miss Muriel was nobody's joke. You came to school and you were not on time. She wanted reasons, and she wanted to make sure. It was like she had a lie detector test attached to her, and she would look at you, and she'd make sure that you were telling the truth. If not, you were going to have to pay a price. Whether it be calling your parents, in school suspension, it was always something. And the boys were really afraid of her, although none of them would actually mention it, or they wouldn't agree to being afraid of her. But let's be honest, we were all afraid of Miss Muriel. So anyway, the boys decided they were going to go back to Rodney's house. They wasn't going to deal with Miss Muriel that day. So they went to Rodney's house, and Rodney said, "Hey, Mom made fried chicken and mac and cheese. Y'all hungry?" And they, of course, they were playing video games, but they were hungry. So Rodney started warming up the food. And when it was time to prepare it, he said, listen now, I'm nobody's maid now. Y'all better come in here. So they all came in there and they ate their food or what have you. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of them playing the game, the telephone rang. Everybody's heart started beating. They all stopped for a moment to listen out. And on the answer machine, it said, PS9 was calling. School was calling to tell that Rodney was not there. He said, oh shoot. Now I ain't getting in trouble for nobody, man. I'm going back to the school. I don't care what y'all do, but y'all better get out of here. So everybody packed their stuff up. They did not clean the kitchen, but they ran out of the house. On their way out of the house, somehow they ended up getting curious about that demolitioned area. So there was a cliff. There was a sidewalk on the left side of the street. They crossed the street and they looked down and they saw, wow, that building was a lot taller than they thought. So they kept looking. Neither of them were afraid of heights. So they kept looking down there. And then Rodney pulled out $1. And he said, I bet you won't jump. So as the story goes, Bo called himself taking the $1 out of Rodney's hand. And he got the $1. But somehow he ended up falling off of that cliff. Now, nobody really knows if he actually placed the bet, accepted the bet by taking the $1 and decided he was going to jump, or he actually fell. But Bo says that as he was falling down from the side of that sidewalk, he said he felt like he was dreaming. And he said he saw 2 angels with him as he fell down to the bottom of that hill. Still had his book bag attached to him. And when he landed, he just fell asleep. He passed out. The boys couldn't believe their eyes, and they were certainly knowing that they were going to get into trouble at this point. So they ran back to the school, and they dealt with Miss Muriel's stories. They didn't care because they just were so afraid. Now, there was an old lady who had a shopping cart, and she was pushing that shopping cart. And as she pushed the shopping cart, she noticed that there were 4 boys on that other side of the street. And she saw 3 boys run off, but she did not know what happened to that last boy. So she crossed the street with her shopping cart. And as she crossed the street, she decided that she was going to look on the side and see what was going on. So she looked down beyond the side of that street, and looked down and over that cliff and saw that there was a young man, a little boy, who was laying in the middle of that construction site. No one was working, but she knew something was wrong. And she realized that must have been the 4th child that she saw that was not running. So she took her shopping cart and she ran to the corner where there was an actual metal pole. And the metal pole had a red and a blue and a white button on it. The white button was for the police. The red button was for the ambulance. And there was another button, another one was for the fire department, that's what it was. So she pressed the white button, and emergency people came on. And they said, excuse me, how can we help you? Is it an emergency? And she said, yes, a little boy. He fell off the cliff. I don't know whether he jumped or anything, but he's down there, and he is laying there, and I don't know, it must be at least 10 feet he fell. You got to get somebody out here. She said, calm down, ma'am, calm down. Where are you? I'm on T-Bout Avenue, and I'm telling you, somebody better come fast. And she said, what exactly is it? She said, I don't know. It's where the new hospital's supposed to be built. Somehow there's a little boy, and he's laying there, and he must have fallen. Please, somebody come. Somebody come. So police department came, firemen came, and the ambulance came. And they picked Bo's body up, and they put him on a stretcher, and they took him to the hospital. On the way, they looked in his book bag to see the emergency information, and they decided to call. They called his mom. She answered the phone. Hello? Ma'am, do you have a son about the age of 7 or 8? I don't know how old he is. But there's a young man here, and she gave the name. And she said, yes, that's my son. He said, please come to Lincoln Hospital. That is where your son has been brought. The information that you need to bring is your driver's license or some form of ID. We will explain everything once you get here. Okay. It was at that point that the school had called on her way leaving the house, telling her that her son had never reached school that morning. More confirmation that it was her son. So she called the father, Bo Sr., called him up, and he said, I'll meet you. In fact, I'm going to come get you. She said, no, I'm going to take a cab. So they met at the hospital. When they met at the hospital, they found that their son had fallen from this cliff. And somehow, all he seemed to have broken was a leg. They couldn't understand it. So by the end of the day, the boys had been called into the main office because everyone knew that those boys, they hung out together. So the school wanted to know how these boys might have been involved. So Rodney ended up telling the story without the dollar portion of it because he felt like he would be responsible. And he didn't want to be held responsible for one of his best friends being in the hospital. So he told the story, and the parents were called, and the principal told them the story. So the father came to the hospital, and he said, look, son, what happened to you? And I want to know the whole story. I want to know the story from the beginning to the end. So he said, Dad, nurse, I need some help. And the nurse came in, and the mom came and said, Joe, don't bother the boy. Please don't. Don't bother the boy. Let him heal. And when he finishes healing, I want to know what's going on here. So on their way leaving, someone from the construction site showed up. And they told the parents, they had the parents sign a certain paper, and they ended up giving them a sum of money because they did not want to be sued, and they wanted to handle the situation out of court. And that's what happened. They ended up handling out of court, and they made sure that they built a safety gate in that area after this happened. But somehow, if you think of it, no one should have had to have such a situation happen to them. This was a dangerous situation where this situation should never have happened. A gate should have been present so that these boys would not have even been tempted with such an experience. So this story is to tell you that not only do we need to spend more time talking to our children about safety first, make safe decisions, and don't trouble, or trouble might just trouble you in your own backyard. So in this story, you see how the friends played part, and how if they had only gone to school and been on time, this would not have been the case. So, hopefully you learned something from this experience, making sure that you're thinking before you're doing things, which is sometimes a problem for all of us, children as well as adults. We don't always think before we do things. But in this case, while the children are home and the parents are present, we can revisit this so that the children are thinking before they make such a harsh decision. And structure is involved, and that we are making the best choice possible. Thanks, guys, for joining us today, and please subscribe and give me a thumbs up, okay? Hopefully you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed this story, and talk to you soon. It is lovely being here.